There was a certain era of this channel where my favorite topics to work with were Marvel, Pokemon, Ben 10, and My Hero Academia. In my ongoing series, the Trismegistus Academy, I've already worked with 3 of those topics, and since this is probably the last pop culture adaptation episode in this series before we get into the endgame, I figured I should turn some My Hero Academia characters into some of Eloise Ludum's freaky monsters, the Laughing Luduls, for this episode narrated by Waru Umarek. It's also especially fitting because My Hero Academia was basically the main inspiration for this series in the first place. So I hope you all enjoy this episode, and let's check in on what happened previously on the Trismegistus Academy. Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
Previously on the Trismegistus Academy. The headmistress of the Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighters, Eloise Ludum, was fed information that the Trismegistus Academy students were going on a field trip to another dimension. Ludum decided to crash it, not realizing the information had been leaked to one of her scouts on purpose so Tahe Professor Strone Goggins could try and assassinate her, as she is much weaker outside her own dimension. As Strone tried to kill her, he was joined by one of Ludum's own students, Alsaya Lamani, who Ludum then banished from her school and mysteriously requested that she become a member of Tahe's Maverick class. Ludum also had her arm torn off that day by a creature being ridden by one of the Mavericks, just before she fled back to her own realm. Alsaya had been working with the Maverick class in secret anyway to concoct a plan to take down Ludum even before being kicked out of the school. She'd also brought her fellow LAFF students, Waru Umarek and Katos, who is secretly Tale Fanimo, granddaughter of Mythil and Ortis Fanimo, in on this plan, but those two still remain at Ludum's school, where every day is a risk to their lives. Waru has knowledge of the past life he lived in another multiverse, where he was killed in an alien invasion at the age of 25. Now he's convinced that he's been reincarnated into some sort of young adult novel, in a multiverse full of pop culture variants from his own past life. Tale Fanimo came to the school under the name Katos to try and kill Ludum in the first place, hoping to cement her legacy as part of an already very impressive family. Katos had been acting cold towards Waru since they'd met, but was very friendly towards their mutual friend Alsaya, who was now no longer their classmate. They're both now continuing their schooling at the LAFF while waiting for the day of the combat tournament between the two schools, the day planned to be when Ludum will finally be defeated. Let's see if they can both make it to that day in the next episode of the Trismegistus Academy. I think I caught some sort of bug on our field trip, one that forced me to actually care about the well-being of the grubby psychos I go to school with. Doesn't help that Ludum has gone from sort of entertaining crazy to full-blown maniac ever since that flying scorpion thing chomped her arm off. We could all tell she was real furious after getting back from that trip. I mean, I guess anyone would be after losing an arm, but it was worse than that still. Even though Tale and I had technically taken down an Elder Legend monster on that trip, Ludum didn't hold up her end of the contest she'd proposed. Would have been pretty cool to get a suit of armor made from that Delaquaza thing, but I guess I should just be glad she didn't slit Tale's and my throats for working with the Tahe kids to take that thing down. Eloise going next level nuts was most evident the morning after a night when I heard some faint screams coming from out in the Little Lands. I assumed some kid had tried to sneak out or steal extra food or something, and Ludum had sent them out there, but turned out not to be a student at all. When we met up for class in the dusty sports dome where we often did combat trials against each other, we saw that strung up to the walls by his torn up arms was the very lifeless body of Scout the Scout. Ludum never even told us what he did to deserve that. She just left us to assume he'd betrayed her or wronged her in some way. It was a pretty clear message though. Don't mess with the nutjob headmistress. I even found myself feeling kinda bad for Scout of all people. That dude may have been a slimy little creep, but his whole life seemed to be dedicated to trying to impress Ludum. If she'd string him up, then that was pretty clear evidence that nobody was safe here. I wouldn't say I was full-on afraid when Ludum called me into her office a couple days later, but, you know, I was at least a bit on edge, I guess. Her office bordered on being more like a throne room. Her massive chair sat behind a long desk in a dark room with a 3-story ceiling. Pretty much the only light was spilling in from the wall-to-wall stained glass windows behind her, so Ludum was silhouetted like a supervillain, with just her overseer runes lighting up a part of her face. I was just waiting for lightning to strike outside to really set the mood. Waru, the true #1 student of the Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighters. How are you since the unfortunate departure of that traitorous Ms. Lamani, In truth, it had kinda sucked having Alsaya leave. As much as I had wanted to not get too attached to anyone, she had become sort of fun to hang out with. I couldn't even enjoy the fact that her being gone made it seem more likely that I actually may be the main character of this story. Of course, my response to Ludum wasn't going to include any positive mention of Alsaya. I said, Lamani kinda clung to me more than I liked anyway. Makes my life easier that she's gone. Ludum grinned menacingly and stood up, pushing up from her desk with both hands. Her missing arm had been replaced by a bunch of bound-together tassels and cloth, formed together to look like an arm that she could stretch out Mr. Fantastic style, or unravel and wrap people up with. I honestly thought it was cooler than her old arm, but add that to the list of things I wasn't about to say to risk setting her off. She marched around the desk and slowly started closing the 10-foot gap between us. My students need to start progressing more quickly. Those irksome whelps at Tahe are slightly more well-trained than I expected. I have surely slowed them down by removing their best teacher, but we need to be ready to trounce them in the combat tournament in a few months. There was something off about the way she said combat tournament, but it sort of got lost in the mess that was the rest of that conversation. She went on. I am going to increase the difficulty of our training. I've been working on some particularly powerful Laughing Luduls, but beyond everything, I need you to be ready. Pretending I wasn't trying to be cautious, I said, Why me specifically? Oh, don't be so humble, Waru. You know you are the fiercest fighter this school has. Well, my intention is for all the Tahe students to be thumped by our own. Ultimately, I will be counting on you to win the whole tournament and put them all in their places. I really didn't like the idea of Ludum paying more attention to me than anyone else, but said, Yeah, that checks out. It's not going to be a problem, though. Nobody at Softy Academy scares me. She got within a foot of me and I had to hold back a shudder. That is excellent to hear, Waru. You know, I've always liked that name. Waru. Did you choose it, or is it one your parents in this life gave you? I paused. She caught me off guard and she knew it. In this life? Her creepy smile peeled back farther. She stretched her tassel arm out across the room to a drawer behind her desk. Come now, Waru, you think I can't recognize another soul who recalls their past life? Frustrating, isn't it? Knowing how little anything happening in this life truly matters, while others scurry around thinking they'll only live once. They're also appalled by death and murder as if they won't get many more chances to live again, as we both have. Funny thing was, I would have agreed with her just a few weeks ago. Not that I was certain everyone always got reincarnated as someone else. Still, I played along. Yeah, hard for anyone in this life to get how little I care about them, since this life feels about as real as a video game compared to my last one. Her arm fully retracted, and she was holding a glowing glass bowling ball type thing with white smoke swirling inside it. And what was that life like? She shoved the ball into my hands, and suddenly the room around us was overtaken by a space that was a weird blend of nostalgic and, gross. It was my old, ratty, tiny apartment in the Shibuya ward of Tokyo in my past life. We could even see me sitting on my dirty couch gaming, with a look on my face that was so devoid of expression, it sort of made me feel bad for, me. I looked down at the ball in my hands. What is this thing? Something I stole millennia ago. It is called the Akashic Corvex. It may have other abilities even I've yet to discover, but the purpose I use it for is looking into glimpses of the past lives of the person wielding it. It seems your current one is far more exciting than your last. Just as she said that, a loud electronic pulse shook the city. We watched me get up and go look out the window. I remember being freaked out seeing the ships coming down and bombs going off, but watching the event from outside my body, it honestly looked pretty devoid of emotion, like I barely cared it was happening. Ludum and I watched me run out of my apartment, and our bodies followed me out into the hall and to the elevator. I was crammed in with a bunch of other people, but the door wasn't closing because some other guy around my age was trying to shove his way in. Looking back now, I could see he was just some scared dude as freaked out as everyone else trying to get to safety. But in that moment, I was just mildly annoyed, which was apparently enough for me to act like a jerk. I thrust my hands between some of the other people and smacked the dude in the face, knocking him away from the door so it could close. I got down to the street and started running. For a bit, anyway. Soon enough, I just slowed down and stopped trying to get out of danger. I guess I kinda forgot how it really felt to be back in my old life, but watching that night back, I pretty clearly remember thinking, what's even the point of running? I didn't really care if I died or if anyone else did. Ever since I got into this life, I've looked back on my old life like it was the one worth caring about. I guess I forgot that even back then, I didn't really care about anything. Eventually, I just started wandering around slowly, like I was taking the longest way possible to get to safety, hoping something would happen. And then I got shot in the back by some stray alien bullet or something, and everything went white. I guess that sphere didn't let Ludum and I look back on the chat I had with my spirit guide, one where I was given a chance to go back, keep living, and do better. And I said no. I didn't really listen to anything the guide had to say after that. I just demanded to be sent to a cooler life, one out of something like a manga. I guess I got what I wanted, but I don't know if I've been enjoying it as much as I thought I would. Ludum took the sphere from me.
Well, that was a more exciting death than I expected, but it still seems like a rather small life compared to one as the superpowered child of royalty. Waru?
She said my name with an unsettling emphasis again. She was probably getting her kicks off the fact that Waru is the Japanese word for evil. What she probably wasn't picking up on was the fact that if you pair it with my last name, Umarek, it basically becomes Umareka Waru, the Japanese word for reincarnate. My name may have been comically on the nose like I'd expect from a character in a cheesy young adult novel, but not in the way Ludum was thinking. At least, I hope not. I may not have cared about anyone in this life for most of my time in it so far, but that didn't make me evil, right? I was feeling pretty off after that, but did my best not to show it. I said, "Fun trip down memory lane, but no offense, is there a point to all this?" She finally marched away from me back to her desk.
No, simply sating my curiosity. You are dismissed. My priority today was preparing you for the more difficult training to come. It is likely for the best that you not get too attached to any of your fellow classmates. Not every student will make it through the coming months, but those who do will be far stronger for having survived them. And it will mean the students who go on to face the Tahe children will be ready to grind their pitiful faces into the dirt for all to see.
After that meeting, I kinda wished I could go back to the pokey monster hunter world and just chill with my Chirathalos buddy. I distanced myself from people for a lot of my new life in this insane multiverse, but I was actually feeling pretty lonely after seeing firsthand that even in my last life, I was a guy who didn't really care much about anything. It's not how I remembered that life, but I guess it's easy to convince ourselves that other times were better than where we are. I ended up just going back to my room to sleep, and I wished I'd slept better when I got to class the next day. Ludum had not been kidding about the new fierce Laughing Luduls. Whoa, what the heck is going on? Am I in another new dimension or something? Hey, pal, nah, you just turned into a non-canonical version of yourself to do a coloring book ad with us. A coloring book? Are you serious? I thought my life was at least a young adult novel, not a children's book. Hey, coloring books for adults is a big thing nowadays. I mean, the Dragons coloring book here is sort of an all-ages type situation, but this Demons and Creepy Creeps one is definitely more of a teenagers to adults situation. I ain't got kids, but if I did, I probably wouldn't hand them a book with these freaks in it. Too spooky for the kiddos, but fun for adults. Benny, ain't you on multiple occasions tried to hand a child a handgun to protect himself from various supervillains and whatnot? Yeah, but I ain't handed him a scary coloring book. I ain't crazy. Wait, who exactly are you? Wait, why Why do I feel like I do know that you're Benny Sharp and Champagne McGregor?
Yeah, you canonically ain't met us yet, Waru, but in the non-canonical advertisement realm, we all just sorta actually know each other, like you get access to other information that the canonical version of you doesn't know. It's kinda crazy that the advertisement realm is starting to get its own lore too. That's not gonna get hard to follow fast.
Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually want to get back to the LAFF. Is this over or what?
Sure, just after this. Remember folks, these coloring books is on sale now if you want to color some PopCross stuff. And he's got other books too, novels with full color art in them, like Vigilance and Mytholethal, and the Trismegistus Academy is going to become one of those novels at some point in the future too.
Well, wait, so my life is actually a young adult?
And we're out of time, back to the story.
Professor Kekuat brought a few classes together and we were taken into this new walled-off area of the Ludul lands next to the school. There were a bunch of jagged stones and smaller brick walls mixed into the yard, and a series of gates at the opposite end, about a mile away. I couldn't see what was in them from that distance, but I knew they wouldn't be a picnic to deal with. Before Kekuat started class, I went up to Tale, who was looking pumped up as usual for a fight. Hey, Katas, I know you can handle your own, but just be extra careful today, okay? Ludum told me she's really upping the challenge level on us. I kind of expected her to reply with something condescending or sarcastic, but instead she said,
Thank you, Waru. I'll be on guard.
Ever since the field trip, she seemed like she was sort of coming around to liking me. I figured it was because Alsaya was gone, so I was basically the only friend she had here now. Kekuat got in front of the class and started barking at us.
Alright punks, this is where we get real. You all need to step up your game, so the headmistress has made some new Luduls for you all to face. You'll be sent out in groups of 4 to fight one Ludul. Each fight will go for 10 minutes. You either defeat the Ludul, you survive until the end, or you die trying.
Both Katas and I were put into the first group, along with Sammy Slazar and this girl, Raya Strenzen. I wasn't a fan of Sammy, but he was pretty good with his stretchy slime powers. I didn't know much about this Raya girl other than I'd seen her shoot blue lasers out of various parts of her body. It almost reminded me a bit of my mom's powers. My mom from this life, I mean. She created blue light armor constructs with a Green Lantern sort of vibe to them, but, you know, had similar glowy sort of look to Raya's lasers. She and Raya even had similar blue hair, but definitely didn't have the same attitude. Raya came across a bit timid. Not the sort of kid who seemed like she'd thrive at a school like this. I hoped she'd hold back so I wouldn't feel too driven to have to protect her from anything. But I could kinda tell that feeling was already coming up. As the 4 of us walked out into the field, I noticed a hovering platform up in the sky above. Ludum was there watching. I was suddenly worried about all the students I was paired with. If Ludum was relying on me to win the combat tournament, she was probably going to push me the hardest. I knew I could take it unless she sent something like the Little Caunus at us, but that didn't mean the rest of my team could survive something on my power level. That's not even me being cocky, I just have way more OP powers than the rest of them. One of the gates opened up, and a tanky freak came charging out that I pretty quickly recognized from a show that I never would have openly admitted was my favorite anime in my last life. Seems like a kinda generic one to call your favorite, but I guess it still was. It was a Nomu from My Hero Academia, but looking like one of Ludum's freaks. That just made me even more worried. In MHA, this thing had been made to take out the Superman of the show, All Might. I mean, it failed, but still. Had the headmistress made this Ludul as strong as that thing was supposed to be in the show? Katas hurled her Starblade right at the charging brute, and the thing batted it away like it was nothing. Sammy stretched out his limbs to try and wrap the thing's legs up, but it just tore right through his grip and kept running. It was headed for Raya, who was shooting beams from her palms and eyes, which were doing about as much as spraying it with a squirt gun. I activated my glowing orbs and called the white one into my chest, hoping my own energy attacks would be more effective. I charged up a ball of energy between my palms, trying to pump as much power into it as I could, then did my best Goku impression and fired a beam right at the Nomu. And yeah, I'm just gonna call it that. We're well past the point of this story avoiding copyright issues, so it's just a freaking Nomu. My beam struck it in the side of the head and did knock it enough to make it spin out and roll on the ground, but it immediately leapt up and kept running at Raya. She realized she wasn't going to do much damage and started shooting beams from her feet, making her fly up off the ground. That wasn't going to help much. This thing could easily leap to her height. I swapped in my flight orb and shot off the ground just before the Nomu did. Just as I was getting close to cutting it off, I swapped in my strength orb. I tried swinging a fist, but the thing just tackled me out of the sky like a meteor. It slammed me through a brick wall, then straight into the ground, before raising both fists and hammering them onto my chest. Felt like someone had shoved a vacuum into my lungs, but I didn't have a second to recover as the thing slammed me again and again. This thing was hitting harder than the freaking Hulk Laughing Ludul Eloise had made. I was barely surviving. If anyone else took a hit from this thing, they were toast. Ludum hadn't just made these things tougher, she'd made them borderline impossible for the other kids. Soon, Katas's Starblade pierced the Nomu's eye, and it freaked out enough for it to get off me. She teleported to her weapon and tore it out. She went for another stab, but its arm swung up to grab her. She backflipped off it and hurled her weapon into its back. Unfortunately, by the time she did that, its eye had already healed. If this thing was like the first Nomu that showed up in My Hero Academia, then it had regeneration powers and impact absorption. I hadn't watched the show since my last life, but I was pretty sure the way All Might had beaten this thing was literally by just pounding it 1,000 times until it absorbed so much impact that it couldn't contain it, and he just punched it into space or something. Was that what I was gonna have to do? We didn't exactly have any other heavy hitters on the field to help me out much. Sammy got onto the thing and wrapped his slimy torso around its eyes, then kept trying to pin down its limbs with his own. He sprayed his sticky slime onto its feet as well, but it was no use. The thing grabbed him and ripped him off. It started pulling at him, trying to stretch him out. If it kept going too long like that, it could end up tearing Sammy in half. Part of me thought, why should I care? That kid was a psycho. Still, I could feel myself getting scared for him. I got some air back in my lungs and charged forward, feeling the ground burst from where I took off. If Ludum wanted to push me, fine. I kinda wanted to push myself too. I threw the hardest punch I could and a shockwave burst off the blow, but the Nomu barely stumbled a step back. I started throwing punch after punch, each one trying to hit harder and harder. I could feel the blows getting absorbed and it seemed nearly useless, but I just kept going. The Ludul finally tossed Sammy aside and took a swipe at my head. It hit me and rocked my brain in my skull, but I stayed up and kept pounding. It started throwing more and more punches too, and every one of them was enough to make me want to keel over. I ignored the pain and kept going. It felt hopeless at first, but then I noticed its skin was getting more and more tensed against its muscles. It was like it was swelling up under its own flesh. This was gonna work. Unfortunately, it snatched me by the waist, ripped me off the ground, and hurled me across the field like a rocket. I switched to my flight and started slowing myself down, but didn't have enough time to decelerate much before I slammed into the wall of the field. I collapsed to the ground, dizzy and unsure if I could get up. I tapped the back of my head and felt warm blood starting to cake my hair. I should have just taken that hit with my strength orb active. My flight mode didn't have anywhere near the same level of durability. Still, I didn't have time to scold myself. Katas was throwing some punches herself and teleporting out of the Nomu's path anytime it swung at her. Sammy used his body like a slingshot, holding a boulder on his torso strung between two stone pillars. He shot the boulder at the Nomu and it hit, shattering the rock. It was a good blow. Raya had landed and was shooting lasers at it again. Her blows were still not quite as effective. Getting irritated, the Nomu snatched the biggest chunk of the boulder. I shot through the air towards the Ludul, watching as it reeled back and hurled the rock right at Raya. She was firing her beams at it, but barely taking scraps off it as the rock came at her. And there it was. She wasn't gonna move in time, and I couldn't stop myself from caring enough to try and save her. I turned my aim towards her and realized how close of a call this was going to be. If I released my flight sphere even a second before I got to her, I wouldn't reach her before the boulder did. I had to just hope I could tackle her out of the way and not get hit myself. I managed to pick up more speed than ever before and heard a pop as I broke the sound barrier. I opened my arms and snatched Raya, tackling her aside then up from the ground right out of the path of the boulder. I practically laughed. I was so excited by the thrill of that rescue. That is, until I slowed down and realized what I'd actually done. "You good, Raya?" She wasn't rescued at all. She was twitching and gagging in my arms. I was only holding her for a few seconds of confusion when her eyes rolled back and she went limp. "Hey, Raya, what? I got you out of the way. What happened?" Sammy infuriatingly chuckled as he said, "You hit her at Mach 1 speed, mate. Probably would have been better letting her get hit by the rock. Bet you snapped her spine in two." I moved my hand down her back and something definitely didn't feel right. Even through her skin, I could feel a clear break in her back. I'd killed her. What had I been thinking? Of course hitting someone like her at that speed would do that. Is this seriously what I get for actually caring and trying to protect someone? A dead kid on my hands? Fury started pulsing through me. I floated to the ground and lay her down. I didn't care if she was probably getting another life. She was just a kid and deserved to try living this one as best she could. I stood up and stared furiously at the Nomu. Katos was still leaping and weaving around it, but its body's tension hadn't built up much more. I needed to handle this. I swapped back in my strength orb and charged at it again. It saw me coming and swung a fist at me. I ducked under it and hammered it in the stomach, then uppercut right into its elbow, knocking its arm away. All the fury I had for Ludum putting a kid as weak as Raya into an arena with this Nomu freak was getting channeled into my fists. The Nomu hit me back, but I just ignored it. I honestly felt like I was dipping in and out of consciousness, but I kept going anyway. Soon, I noticed it slowing down and shaking. Its skin was so tight against its body it looked like it was about to pop like a balloon. I leapt back a few feet and took a sharp breath in. I felt like that air was sucking in a whole swell of energy, and I sent all of that right into my fist. I exploded forward, showering the ground behind me in rubble, as I smashed my knuckles right into the Nomu's chest. Time seemed to freeze at the moment of impact. This was the death blow. I knew it, the Nomu knew it, and Ludum knew it. I hated that she was probably impressed with me. The Nomu soared into the wall at the opposite end of the arena so fast that it may as well have teleported. Its body burst like a gooey piñata, splattering against the brick wall and the ground beneath. I got about 3 seconds to enjoy the sight before I collapsed to my knees. In spite of everything, I still just wanted to go back and see if somehow Raya had woken up. If that Jake kid were here, could he have healed her? Could the Tahei professors have done anything? I mean, it didn't matter. We weren't at Tahei. We were at this absolute maniac school who couldn't care less whether any of us lived or died.
Are you alright?
Katas's voice sounded surprisingly gentle as she knelt down next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. My eyes briefly darted back towards Raya. No, I'm not. I didn't know why, but it felt nice as Katas put her hand over my heart and quietly said, "You didn't kill her, Ludum did, and Ludum's own burial day approaches." I nodded as Katas helped me up, and we headed with Sammy back towards the other students. I planned to pick up Raya's body, but as we were getting close, the ground around her glowed and the stones she was on lifted into the air. I looked up to see Ludum using the controls on her floating platform to move the stones out of our walled-off area, and completely unceremoniously dropped the body out into the Little Lands to be food for her freaks. My teeth clamped together so hard I thought they might snap, but again Katas quietly said, "She'll get hers soon enough, Waru. There's nothing else we can do right now." It seemed like she'd done a complete 180 on me. We got back to the others and another group was sent out. It seemed like Ludum had sent one of the tougher ones for me. A couple more rounds of students fought off a Ludul that was a lot like Froppy from My Hero Academia, then the next went up against a Bakugo Ludul that fried one of the kids' legs up so bad, I'll be surprised if he doesn't lose it. Neither group beat their Luduls, but at least they all survived. Still, I was insanely tense watching them. I guess it was noticeable because near the end of that third fight, Katas put her hand on my back sympathetically. I muttered to her, "So, what, you don't hate me anymore?" She responded confidently, "I dislike anyone who cares not for the well-being of others. You struck me as that sort of person upon our first meeting. You've slowly, quite slowly, mind you, shown me that I was wrong." I thought for a second, then replied, "No, you weren't. But if not caring about anyone else turns you into someone like Ludum, then it's really long past time I started caring." When the fourth round started, there were a few more heavy hitters put into the field, along with Vinda de Mar. She was kinda the odd one out in that group. She could be tough, but the fiends she could spawn off her body to fight with couldn't exactly handle a tanky fighter, or someone anywhere near as tough as My Hero Academia's Shoto Todoroki. Depending on which season of the show this Todoroki Ludul was representing, it could have been way tougher than that Nomu I fought. His ice and fire powers could scorch and freeze this entire field in a second. Thankfully, it seemed like this thing was a bit underpowered comparatively, but still, not enough. Vinda had arrogantly ran in early on, with 3 fiends a short way ahead of her, but the Ludul froze them in a single flick of its wrists. It then aimed an arm and shot a cannon of fire at Vinda. She tried to dodge, but not fast enough. It hit her dead on and sent her pinwheeling back through the air. She slammed through a brick wall and struggled to get herself back up. Thankfully, some of the others started taking on the Ludul, but Vinda was still in trouble. Her hard skin had kept her from being too hurt by the flames, but she was clearly still injured. She was fire-resistant, but not fire-proof. With her fiends frozen, but not destroyed, she couldn't even make new ones to help her. She started scouting around the border of the battle, waiting for her shot to charge in and swipe with her tail. But before she could, the Ludul slammed the ground and made a massive ring of ice shoot around it. She leapt up to evade it, but landed too soon and her feet got frozen to the ground. She started slashing at it with her tail, chipping away the ice. The Ludul noticed her and leapt away from the others, who all just let it go after her. I was suddenly seeing flashes of Raya again. Thankfully, Vinda got her feet free and leapt over the Ludul as it got close and swung a frozen fist at her. She slashed it in the back of the head with her tail, but it barely seemed to notice as it spun around and swung a flaming fist towards her. A plume of fire shot out that she just barely sidestepped as she swiped at its eye with her tail. It gave a grim chuckle, then took another swipe with a flaming claw. She ducked under it, but as she did that, it stomped the ground, and another swell of ice sprang up around it, freezing Vinda's knees to the ground. The Ludul loomed over her, chuckling in spiteful cheer. Vinda swung up her tail to grab its flaming arm to hold it away, but it quickly ripped free. It was going to cook her or freeze her or something, and I wasn't going to sit around and watch. I called in my yellow flight and speed orb and burst off the ground so fast I barely saw the first 100 meters go by as I shot right toward the Ludul. I switched to my strength a nanosecond before I reached it and tackled it away from Vinda. I drove its stupid, grinning face into its own ice and skidded on top of it across the yard. It cracked its arm backwards and shot a beam of fire into my face, but I just ignored it and slammed my fist into its spine over and over. When we slid to a stop, it made an ice pillar spring out of the ground and freeze around my arm. I instantly shattered it off and pounded the thing again and again before I grabbed each of its arms and with all my strength ripped in either direction, tearing them off. The Ludul flailed around for a few more seconds before falling limp. That felt pretty good, but of course then Kekuat screamed, "Umarek, no interrupting other students' matches!" Before I could say anything, Ludum floated down closer and said,
Indeed, Waru. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you are not the only student who needs to prove their worth and test their might.
I wanted to just leap up and rip Ludum off that platform, but that might have just been me giving up the shot I'd get on her when this whole plan thing with the Tahe kids got underway. I cringed internally, but just tried to play along with what Ludum wanted me to be. Their worth? Please, none of these dorks are worth an eighth of me. You gonna really keep your best student on the sidelines waiting, just watching this garbage when I could be training more? I knew I couldn't save everyone from these fights, but maybe I could at least take whatever the toughest foe Ludum had planned off the board for the rest of them and save a few kids. I went on. Let the extras take a break. Give me the fiercest Ludul you've got waiting back in those cages. As she stared at me, I couldn't tell if she was impressed or feeling disrespected. I worried I may have just sealed my fate and she'd chuck me out into the Little Lands eternally, but instead she threw her arms up.
Now this is the level of dedication and confidence I expect from a true Ludum Academy student. Everyone else, step back and allow a superior specimen to take the field alone.
I was glad that worked. Very briefly, anyway. Then I realized that Ludum really did have something tougher than that Nomu waiting for me. I looked back towards Katas to see how she was reacting to my little show. I hoped she'd know I was playing up the part to trick Ludum. Katas shook her head with a grin. I'm pretty sure that was a "I'm impressed but you're nuts" sort of look. I was half the field away from the gates, but when one slid open and I saw sparking teal lights from within, I pretty quickly knew who I was facing. The main character himself. I just hoped it was a little based on Izuku Midoriya before he started getting all his extra powers in My Hero Academia, like knockoff spidey senses and webbing and flight and all that insanity. With my foe starting at a distance, I swapped to my white energy projection orb and fired a barrage of rocketing bolts towards him. He stopped and just stared at them coming. I'd seen enough anime to know that his next move was either going to be him arrogantly letting them all hit him, a bunch of smoke kicking up then passing to reveal the enemy was completely unharmed, or he'd move so fast just before they hit him that he basically teleported out of the way. Thankfully, it was the first. He got hit by all of them, but I didn't wait around to see the "I'm not hurt" reveal. I charged up a beam of energy as fast as I could and fired it right at the same spot. It struck and another eruption of dust and stones burst up around my foe. Once again, I couldn't see what that had done, but I still wasn't waiting around. I switched to my flight and speed orb and sprinted right towards my target. I got close, leapt into the air, and switched to strength. I hoped my target hadn't moved, but I shot through the dust and hit nothing, skidding to the ground and sliding into the cage it had just come out of. Before I had a second to turn around, I felt a bunch of bands wrap around my waist. Or should I say black whips. It was the late series Midoriya after all. I should have seen that coming. I was yanked back onto the battlegrounds by the whips stemming from the Ludul's fists. I spun around in midair as I got close and tried to use all the momentum to fire a massive punch into the Ludul's face. Unfortunately, it caught my fist. A shockwave burst from between us, clearing the cloud of dust. The Ludul leapt up, carrying me by the fist as it floated in the air. I swung my other fist for its head, but it once again caught my strike. It then swung back its head. I knew where this was going and decided to match it. I swung back my head, and we smashed skulls right between us. Bad idea. I instantly blacked out. Thankfully, I came to quickly, but when I did, I was being hurled around in a circle on the end of the Ludul's black whips. It slammed me through walls and boulders before whipping me over its head and smashing me straight into the ground. My entire body was aching. I wanted to just give up, but weirdly, the thing that kept me going was a thought that jumped to mind. The reason I'd done this in the first place. If I didn't fight this thing, if I didn't kill it, some other kid would have to take it on. I was the only one who could do this. I obviously wasn't happy about feeling the need to protect this psycho batch of kids, but I did have to admit, doing so did give me a level of, I guess, passion, for lack of a better word, that was beyond anything I remembered having before, in this life or the last. I noticed the black whips were still on me. I grabbed them myself and ripped the Ludul towards me. It came at me foot first. I held my arms up, crossed in front of me like I was going to block, but the second it got close enough, I ducked down, then leapt up with as much force as I could, right as it got over me. I tackled it straight up into the sky, grabbed its waist, and hurled it straight down with all my might. It shot down like a rocket. But its whips were still around my waist. I was ripped down to the ground along with it, but used the momentum to get the blow I tried to get earlier. The Ludul smashed into the ground, and before it could get up, I smashed right down on top of it, pounding my fist into its head. It was a solid hit, but it recovered way quicker than I expected. It unbound me from the whips, shoved me just above it, then flipped and bicycle kicked me, sending me smashing into the wall of the arena and dropping. I punched the ground as I dizzily got up. Strength wasn't going to be enough, but without my strength orb active, I'd lose my durability and not survive a single strike from this thing. I looked up at the other two orbs floating around me. My foe was walking towards me, trying to look all intimidating. Okay, it kind of was intimidating, but it was also just making me more determined. It started speeding up, quickly getting to superhuman levels. I didn't have much time to think. I said, "Alright, this has never worked before, but Spirit Guide, if you're still watching and you still care, give me a break here. This is Hail Mary time." I reached up and grabbed my white energy projection orb while still keeping my strength orb active. The air around me suddenly got light, and all the hairs on my arm stuck up so fast I thought they'd fly off. My arm began to glow with white and red light. My body felt like there was a sun burning inside it, but both powers were working at once. At the very last second before my foe got to me, I swung my arm forward with my palm open. The ball of my hand smashed into the Ludul's chest like a train. Then, energy streaked down my arm, forming into a ball of light in my hand. That exploded forward, and a red and white beam sent the Ludul careening back across the field, slammed straight through the opposite wall and out into the Ludul lands. My whole body felt insane after that. I had so much strength and power surging through me at once, I felt like Goku and Scarlet Witch had had a baby. I muttered, "Why did that actually work?" Then, a voice I'd only chatted with once before rang in my head.
Because you actually learned to care about something other than yourself, chucklehead. What a surprise! Personal growth equals power growth. Wow! Now go pulverize that creepy freak.
As much as that spirit guide weirdo can be an obnoxious tool, it was actually nice hearing from them again. That fight did end up going for another few minutes, but the Jot Notes version of it is, I went full-blown Super Saiyan on that Deku wannabe. I mean, I didn't get my Flight Orb mixed in there too, but I could tell that with more training, and the right incentive, I'd become powerful enough to use all 3 abilities at once. Ludum was obviously pretty impressed with what I achieved that day, but I knew someday soon she'd see what a terrible idea it was getting me so powerful. In a few months, I was going to make sure Ludum regretted turning me into an absolute beast.
If you enjoyed this and you haven't seen the whole Trismegistus Academy series, you might want to go back to the beginning of the playlist that I'll have linked in the cards. This month's PopCross Community Redraw prompt is also people submitting their own versions of Ludum Academy for Fearsome Fighter students. So if you want to submit your own student, you can participate in that as well. Or if you just want something My Hero Academia related, you might want to check out my My Hero Academia Characters as Demons episode, which is, similar creepy sort of designs to this episode. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote by someone named Ratan Tata, who said, "Slow success builds character, and fast success builds ego." Admittedly, I wouldn't say that's universally true, but if you're working towards something and it's taking longer than you think it should, or taking longer than you wanted it to, which it almost always will, remember that during that time, I've said this a tons of times, tons of different ways, but you're building yourself up into the person, gaining the level of resilience that you need to maintain that success when you achieve it, and to just be a better person when you have that success. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday.